Sunday Skate with Scott McLaughlin and Andrew Raycroft. Brought to you by Shaw's and Star Market. Perfecting the art of fresh on WEEI.
Hughes. Patterson to Proulx. Miller. Proulx tees it up and scores! Besser around the boards. Miller to Hughes. To Miller. And a tip home by Besser. The Bruins blow a 2-goal third-period lead and are defeated in overtime.
All right, welcome into Sunday Skate. Here we are, another week, talking about another blown lead for the Bruins.
Just in time. Look who it is.
We got Razor. Just walked in. We got Bridgette. I'm your host, Scott McLaughlin. We got Nico behind the glass. And looks like it's going to be a great road win for the Bruins. They're going to have 5 or 6 points on the road trip. All they got to do is hold on to a 2-goal lead in the third period against the Vancouver Canucks. And they can't do it. They end up losing in overtime, 3-2. They give up another extra attacker goal. And we sat here last week, and collectively we weren't super concerned, but we were like, they have to figure it out. Last Saturday, they blew a lead against the Kings, lost that game in overtime. Wednesday night in Edmonton, they blew a 4-1 lead and then a 5-4 lead in the third period. Now that game they won in overtime. But here we are, third time in 5 games they've blown a multi-goal lead. It's been a problem all season. They have 8 losses when leading after the second period, most in the NHL. And my question to kick things off here is, when does it go from they just have to find a way to fix this to they can't fix this, and it's a fatal flaw? Because I am just about there, guys.
No.
He came in so pessimistic this morning, Razor. Like, so pessimistic. I was I can't wait for Razor to just
I'm going to be the one who has
disagree.
to be talked off the ledge here this morning.
Yeah, no fatal flaws yet. So,
are we sure?
Yes, positive. Because all it takes is one lucky bounce in Game 4 of the playoffs to get out of the round, and all of a sudden you say, oh, they're 6-on-5. It's a beautiful thing. So for me, I separate the losses or the leads from 6-on-5. Because you look around the league, there's tons of teams losing leads in games. Like, it's inevitable. Last night, Edmonton was down 3-0. They're 3-2. Like, it's a game, and then they blow it from there. But every single night in the National Hockey League, teams are blowing 2 or 3 goal leads. Now, the issue with the Bruins, and there is an issue, is 6-on-5. That is the issue. That's what's leading into those 8 losses in after a third period. Now, only one of those is regulation. So, again, that leads, to they're not blowing leads prior to 6-on-5. They're blowing a lot of leads because of 6-on-5. And I think that stat of 7 overtime losses after leading after 3 after 2 is the issue to 6-on-5. And we saw it in Game 7. We saw them not being able to do it. It goes all the way back to that, because if they close out Game 7, 6-on-5, then they're still playing hockey from last season. And for me, it's 6-on-5 has to be fixed. It has to be looked at. It has to be dissected to the absolute minuscule, because for some reason they can't close out. And every other team in the league closes out 6-on-5, except for the Las Vegas Golden Knights, who are tied or one ahead of Bruins 6-on-5 goals, which is also interesting.
Yeah, and you would think they would be decent at that because they have a good penalty kill, right? It's similar. You're down one guy had a good penalty kill, and that's really what it comes down to. It's like, okay, usually a good penalty killing team is also pretty good with the other team's extra attacker on the ice and clearing the puck, getting it out of the zone. But they had a lot of trouble getting it out with the extra attacker on the ice. They lost 2 faceoffs, both with Zacha on the ice for those last 2 goals. And that's another issue as well. They're usually pretty good at faceoffs, but if you don't win the draw, you have to find a way to get possession and get the puck out.
Yeah, the faceoffs there are an issue. Leaving guys uncovered at the front of the net has been an issue on a few of these. You saw that last night with, one of them, Boeser gets open off a faceoff. Forbert's a little slow getting over. Another one, Boeser's set up in front and allowed to screen Swayman. I think Carlo had his stick tied up and didn't get the body out of the way. And then the overtime winner, it's a power play, which I think another issue in these has been some really costly penalties by the Bruins, bad times, mental mistakes. In this case, it's Jake DeBrusk jumping on the ice way too early for a too many men. And again, it's Boeser ends up with too much space at the front, and Bruins couldn't deny the pass into him. Didn't have his stick tied up. So there's a lot of issues here, I think, to get through. Razor, I'm going to push back on you separating the comebacks from the 6-on-5 extra attacker situations, because to me they are connected. I think it's the same idea of they're getting backed up too much, they're getting too conservative, and it's starting to snowball downhill on them, and they can't stop it. And I think that's culminating in the 6-on-5, giving up that extra attacker goal. But to me, it's starting before that. I mean, they were hemmed in that entire third period. And even after Vancouver gets one, you're thinking maybe that lights a spark under them. Maybe they get more aggressive, get back into this. They still ended up in their own zone. They couldn't recover from that. And then it almost feels inevitable with this team at this point that it's just going to keep rolling downhill on them until they give up that extra attacker goal. And we're going to get into, trade deadline stuff, some interesting discussion from the likes of Elliot Friedman and Jeff Marek this week about Linus Ullmark with the Bruins listen on him. Where it leads to me is, I have generally been of the mind that, you're going to kind of play out this year, maybe make a couple minor moves. I now wonder if, a bigger shakeup is on the table before this deadline, especially involving guys who maybe aren't part of your future plans, because it does feel to me like it's almost in this team's DNA and, in their heads that they just can't close out these games. It's what cost them in the first round against Florida last year, and they've had all season to try to get this figured out, and it's still a problem.
It's I think it's so unfair and so far-fetched to say it's in their DNA, et cetera, because they have 81 points. They're literally they have the second most points in the National Hockey League through 59 games in this season. And so that means there's literally 30 other teams that would love to have the record that the Bruins have in the National Hockey League right now. So to go that these guys can't close, they can't finish, they finished 34 other games that no one else has finished. So I agree there's issues, and I agree that 6-on-5 has been a problem, and last night certainly they sat back way too much. I don't think sitting back has been their issue every single time that they've lost after the third period. I think it's been a bunch of different things. So yeah, I think it's a little knee jerky because of what's happened this week in the last 8 days, and now all of a sudden the DNA of this team is broken when the fact is they have almost the most amount of points in the league.
And I think another thing that correlates with the losses and the not extending leads, and that's another reason why you're allowing teams to get back in, is that they haven't been successful on the power play. So they get 4 chances against Vancouver. I went back, did the math. In the 4 games since we had the last Sunday skate, they're 1 for 11 on the power play. That's 9%. That's not good. And they're you
can even extend that to they're 3 for 34 since the All-Star break, which is it's the same. It's 8.8%.
Yeah, that's not good enough. And again, you go, all of these games are 1-goal games. If you get 3 more power play goals, now there's 3 games they didn't blow leads, or 3 games we're not talking about it, and 3 more points. So again, it's it's broader than just two of these little things that were. It is a whole thing. It when you're 3-3-4, and which again you can back into it. They have 7 losses in their last 10 games. I mean, that doesn't feel good, and anyone following the team doesn't like the loss, whether it's an overtime or shootout or in regulation. It's a loss is a loss. Even if you can accept the point some nights, it's still a loss. So I understand the fact that people are upset about it. It's just you got to be careful about making a knee jerk on this when you start talking about the DNA needs to get changed and now we have to blow the thing up at the deadline. That's my.
I don't want to blow it up. I wouldn't use that word, but shake it up. I think that should be on the table. Like just something that changes the look a little, just something that gives them a different feel going forward. Because if they more or less stand pat, maybe it's a depth move somewhere. What is this team's ceiling? Because it doesn't feel like a Stanley Cup team to me. And I understand where they are in the standings. I understand they've won a lot of games. They have a lot of points. But you can't blow leads in the playoffs. You have to close these games out. And again, we're now going on 3/4 of a season and the playoffs last year where this has been an issue. And
we can't do we can do the playoffs last year for the sake of like the conversation, but you can't do it when you're talking about roster. Because they literally have 3 centers that were in the lineup last year in Game 7 that aren't in the lineup now. So you can't do both when it comes to roster construction because they have changed the roster significantly since Game 7 last year.
Sure, but it's a lot of the same guys. It's the same coaching staff. So like
Fire the coach.
No, I'm not going. I'm not going there yet.
Okay, just making sure.
Not going there yet.
Have we had that? Have we had callers calling into the other shows saying fire Jim Montgomery?
I'm sure you can find them.
It might be coming.
I mean,
it might be coming.
Call in if you want to do that. 617-779-7937. No, but they haven't been able to solve this problem, and I get like you don't. If you're going to trade Linus Ullmark, say, like if you're going to do something that big, you have to get this great return. Well, I don't know. Can you quote unquote lose the trade and still come out with a different look that works better down the stretch, or someone else? You know, they have pending free agents, Grzelcyk, Forbort, DeBrusk. Like, I think sometimes these shake-up moves or moves that just change the look of your team a little can benefit you. And I would point to the 2011 Bruins. On a player-for-player basis, they did not win the Blake Wheeler for Rich Peverley trade. Blake Wheeler was a better player than Rich Peverley, but Rich Peverley was more what that team needed. He fit a bigger need on that team and played the way that they wanted to play. 2004 Red Sox traded away Nomar Garciaparra, was by far the best player that got moved in the series of trades they made. It was a huge shakeup, and it paid off. So that's where I come at it as it's not blowing it up. I'm not trading away like my captain. Like I'm not doing anything that stupid. I'm saying shake it up. I'm saying like give this team a different look because I don't think their ceiling is Stanley Cup team the way that they're constructed right now and the way that they keep blowing these leads.
I'm very proud of you for getting in a Nomar Garciaparra reference. Okay, I didn't think that name would ever come up on the Skate podcast, but he was my favorite, and I was devastated by that trade. So thanks for bringing that up, Scott. Yeah, I think that we'll get more into this because I think we got to hit trending soon. But Scott has a lot of feelings about this that he told me about before we got on the air.
Glad we have 2 hours.
Yeah, and he's written about it this week, and there was some trade rumors involving Ullmark once again. It cropped up last year. It's cropping up again. So we'll talk about whether or not we think that there's some talk going on with management about the possibility of really actually trying to trade him away.
Yeah, I want to get to that next. Again, you can call in 617-779-7937. Let us know how you feel. Do you want a big trade? Are you more optimistic with Razor? You think they can play through it? Or are you feeling pessimistic like I am? You can also text us 37937. Bridgette's got you trending, and we'll be back after this.
You're listening to Sunday Skate on WEEI.
Teams out there do believe that the Bruins are trying to upgrade their roster. And all you have to do is look at what they are capable of and say, it's not coming out of the draft. Do they really want to deal their top prospects, some of whom have already played in the NHL? I don't think so. So if they want to make changes, it probably has to come off their roster. And that's why I think people are looking at Ullmark.
Okay, that is Elliot Friedman on the 32 Thoughts podcast, talking about the Bruins' options as they approach the trade deadline. And, you know, what he doesn't mention there, but what is also worth mentioning as far as, yeah, if the Bruins are going to bring in anyone of significance, they have to trade off the active roster. The other part of it is they have no cap space. So there has to be money in, money out. Like, it has almost an exact match. So he's talking about Ullmark coming up, and he's not reporting that the Bruins are shopping Ullmark or that a trade's likely or anything like that. He's, I think, mostly speculating, but based on, you know, some whispers he's heard. You know, Elliot Friedman doesn't just make things up. He doesn't just throw things out there that aren't at least being discussed in some hockey circles somewhere around the league. So that caught my ear this week because it feels like that is a little bit of a shift from other things that we've heard, you know, especially locally. It feels like we all kind of just take it for granted that they're not going to trade a goalie in season. If it's going to happen, they're going to wait till the summer. And this talk kind of, even before Saturday's loss, sort of opened my mind to the possibility that, hey, maybe that is the route to go. If they feel like they need, you know, to add a significant player, Linus Ullmark is a valuable asset. He has a $5 million cap hit that does free up a good chunk of money. Is it on the table? Razor, what do you make of this coming up?
Well, it's easy, right? It's easy. It's easy for because this started with Biz, right? And Biz is the best, and what he's done and how he's built that whole thing is nuts. But Biz brings it up this week. Now Elliot seems to have to kind of piggyback it because that's the talk this week, and he's on Hockey Night in Canada. I don't understand, and no one's been able to explain this to me. No one's been able to tell me what Linus Ullmark's worth. That's where it begins and ends for me, because I don't see how any other team is going to value Linus Ullmark more than what the Boston Bruins value Linus Ullmark right now. I think the narrative, and people want Linus Ullmark to be traded because you say significant asset, right? Is that I think people think that Linus Ullmark is going to get traded for a top 6 forward or a top 4 defenseman. And that's not going to happen, folks. Like that's not what he is worth to everybody else. You're not trading him for Leon Draisaitl or that was literally the talk at the start of the year. Well, maybe you'll be able to get Draisaitl's contract coming up. Like maybe you get Linus Ullmark for Leon Draisaitl. Like that's not the case. You're not getting Linus Ullmark for Noah Hannafin straight up. That's not that isn't going to be what the value is for Linus Ullmark. And that's where it kind of begins and ends for me, is that you can't trade Linus Ullmark midseason or Jeremy Swayze, any goalie that is important to you, for a second-round pick in the middle of the season. Yeah, I just don't know how that's possible. You don't trade him for a prospect. I would agree with you if you could get a top 6 forward or a top 3 D for one of these goaltenders, you do it. But that's just not the case, because the New Jersey Devils need a goaltender more than anybody. There's 4 or 5 other teams that could use a goalie, but you look at the New Jersey Devils, they're not making a trade for anybody. They're just happy to use a 3-goalie rotation because they don't value a goaltender as much as all the other teams do.
So I will note, 2 years ago, Marc-Andre Fleury did get a first-round pick mid-season. So it's the goalie trades midseason are rare, but there are examples where teams that have felt like they're a goalie short have splurged and have given up a real asset.
Yeah, and do you have the other side of that trade in front of you? Like was it just straight up a first round pick?
I believe there might have been a couple other pieces involved, but that was essentially it. It was Minnesota Wild got Marc-Andre Fleury, Chicago Blackhawks got a first round pick.
But see, for the Bruins, then they would have to turn around and get rid of that first round pick for something like that to get an actual piece and use that first round pick to go after Noah Hanifin. Because more than likely, you're trading Ullmark to a team that needs a goalie, but that team might not be the team that has who you want on it. So you have to find a way to turn it around and make another move with whatever you get from them. So
yeah, and I'm totally okay with that. Like if you're Riz, I think you're right. It's probably not going to be a straight up hockey trade where you trade Linus Ullmark for top 6 forward or top 4 defenseman. Maybe that's out there, but I kind of doubt it too. But if you trade him for the assets or asset that allows you to turn around and then go make that other trade to bring in that impact skater, like that makes sense to me as well. And so I guess like I would point out, because they've been linked to Noah Hanifin for a while, and salary-wise that lines up. So let's say it's more or less that. Like Ullmark goes out and Hanifin comes in, and maybe there's an extra asset or two somewhere along the way. But if it's essentially that, would you do it?
No, I wouldn't, because Noah Hanifin doesn't solve 6-on-5 or all these other issues that we just talked about, blowing leads. I think and Noah Hanifin's probably coming here in the summer anyways. Why would you give up a huge asset for a guy who wants to come here, who's openly said he wants to come here, and is probably the reason why he hasn't got traded is because everyone around the league is talking how he wants to go to Boston and he wants to sign with Boston. So,
well, does that maybe lower his trade value a little bit?
It certainly does. So maybe you don't have to give up the first rounder. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. So of course, and
it also makes your team better when you need them to be better this year in the playoffs. Like
correct.
You can't.
We just backed into a lot of ifs, though. That's my only thing. We just backed into a lot of ifs. So it's like I hate doing the fantasy football trades. Like, let's be realistic about this. In the context to it, Billy Guerin was the general manager of the Minnesota Wild at that time, who won a Stanley Cup with Marc-Andre Fleury, who loves Marc-Andre Fleury, won't trade him, loves him more than anything, and is happy to give up a first-rounder. At the same time, he was buying out like 30 contracts just to get his buddy Marc-Andre Fleury. So a little context to that deal as well is that, you know, there's no Linus Ullmark lovers like Bill Guerin loves Marc-Andre Fleury out there. So I think that mark has changed a little bit, even if it was just a couple of years ago. I want to see deals get made. I want to see the Boston Bruins get better. I think we're all on the same page there. I just don't know if the goalie is the piece that is going to substantially do that. I think they're going to have to get more creative and find different ways to do it. That's my only thing. I think they would trade him if they can make their team better. I really do, but I guess my thing is I don't think that that's possible. That's because I just haven't seen it happen. I haven't seen any trades made in the NHL other than Calgary, Winnipeg, Montreal, and Vancouver. No one else is dealing, and a lot of other teams and a lot of other goalies have been more thrown out there, like the Markstrom thing, right? We've heard Markstrom for months, and why is no one making that deal? Like Calgary would love to make that deal, and they've asked him to waive his no trade, and no one's doing it. So why is that? And usually I get to someone's not giving enough or not taking enough.
Yeah, I lean more with Razor on this. I like the premise, Scott, of it's okay to, but I'm more apt to do what you're saying and to trade out money and potentially not 100% win the trade. Maybe you don't get quite as much back. If it's maybe Jake DeBrusk, or if it's Matt Grzelcyk and you have to give up a little bit more to get rid of his salary. Like it.
What about one of your prospects? What about Beecher or Lizell or any of these guys? We keep seeing guys. We keep hearing, well, the Bruins don't have any prospects. And then you look at their third or fourth line last night, or 3 guys that started in the minors that are all developing pretty well. Like they're coming up and contributing and playing. So can I would be, that might, 1, there might be a lot more value there. 2, are those guys more, isn't it easier to get those guys out the door than a goalie who just won the Vezina and who's actually really contributing right now?
Well, it is, but that doesn't solve the money issue.
That's what I was going to say.
You still got to figure that part out, and that's where, Bridgette, to your point, maybe it's a Grzelcyk, Forbert, even if you're targeting a forward, even maybe DeBrusk. the issue there. So, Rizzy, you're right. Like they have guys who can come up and contribute. Now, I would say the guys on the fourth line are guys who have been around, right? Like Anthony Richard and Justin Brazeau don't have much NHL experience, but they're 26, 27 years old. With their top prospects, like the issue there is you have so few young players who have top 6 or top 4 upside. So if you think, I think Mason Lohrei is already getting close to that. Like he's played top 4 minutes on this road trip and held his own just fine. So if you think he's a future top 4 defenseman, that's tough to give up because you don't really have another one of those.
Yeah, you're not trading Lohrei. No.
Can I bring up a name that we haven't talked about in a while because he's out for the rest of the season? Matt Patra. Like, are they willing to move Matt Patra for a top 6 forward? I know in some sort of a package. Probably it's not just going to be Matt Patra, but that's somebody that we talked about in the beginning of the season as being like untouchable. But I'm sure the Bruins are taking calls about prospects, and he would be someone on that list that people might be interested in because he's so young and he has potential in the future. And how much do the Bruins value that center prospect? And maybe another team's looking for that. It's not going to help them this year, but you're talking about a seller, so they're not trying to make a playoff run this year anyway.
Yeah, in terms of like legitimate blue chip type prospects, like it's basically those two, Lohrei, Patra, and Fabian Lysell. Like that's essentially it. Even, Georgi Merkulov is lighting up the AHL, but he's also 23 years old. Like he's further along in his development, so the ceiling's probably a little lower. All right, let's get the phone lines involved here. Let's go to Maria from Watertown, our usual leadoff hitter. Maria, good morning. What do you got?
Good morning. Razor, I'm going to disagree with you, but I'm going to do it respectfully because I think this issue is not just a 6v5. It starts with 5v5. And I frankly am sick and tired of hearing Brandon Carlo in the post game and Coach Montgomery in the post game, blah, 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 saying the same things over and over again and not effectuating any change. When do we start holding this coaching staff accountable for what is transpiring on the ice? These are not small sample sizes at this point. And last I checked, bend, don't break doesn't work in this new NHL. And so I'm baffled about, why when you've got Brazeau, Anthony Richard, Boquist, those guys were your best players last night, your best line. I didn't see them making any egregious mistakes. Yet when I go and I look at their ice time, they're virtually all under 12 minutes of ice time for a full game. So, I think that the coaching staff needs to start looking themselves in the mirror as well as these core players and figuring out why they can't close out a game. Good teams, any good team in any sport has the ability, before it even gets to overtime, to close out their opponents. And this is not a cycle that is going to lend itself for any sustained playoff success. So I'm baffled, I'm aggravated, and I'm frustrated because it's time to stop talking and it's time to start making whatever changes that Coach Montgomery alluded to last night in his postgame about looking at the personnel on the ice.
All right. Thank you, Maria. Great call. Passion.
I thought she might be like going down that road. We thought like calling and ask for Montgomery to get fired. No, but she was holding him more accountable than we have so far. We're kind of blaming some of the players, but obviously coaching is involved in this, and she's not happy. And I didn't think that the changes that he made to the power play units helped at all. I thought the power play units looked terrible against Vancouver. Moving DeBrusk and Geekie to that top unit did not do anything to help their cause. They went 0 for 4, and those adjustments that he made didn't work. So there's got to be more to come.
Yeah, and Nico, I don't know if we have this ready to go, but Montgomery after the game talked about maybe he's going to the same well too many times, talking specifically about the 6-on-5 situations. But I think it is fair to question coaching's role in this? You know, we hear Montgomery, and it sounds like he can identify the issues. He says they sat back too much. He wants them to be more aggressive, you know, maybe try different personnel. But at some point when it keeps happening, like, is it getting through? Like, okay, so let's hear from Montgomery. We got this.
Now, more of the guys, Scott McLaughlin and Andrew Razor Raycroft. It's Sunday Skate on WEEI.
Yes, Sunday Skate is back. More of the guys. I'm Scott McLaughlin.
Bridgette.
And with Andrew Razor Raycroft.
Still working on
and
that.
the girl, Bridgette Proulx.
We're still working on the intro, I guess.
We'll get that
done.
Bothers me.
We're gonna make a trade for a new intro before the deadline.
Yes, please.
That's what we're doing.
I'm willing to give up assets to get that fixed.
All right, let's go to Jay in North Carolina, who has some thoughts on the Bruins. Good morning, Jay.
Good morning, folks. The Lunch Pail crew, the diehards, on a Sunday. Good to talk to you. Listen, I want to tell you that the defense wins championships, and the defense begins with the goalies. You've got two of the best goalies in the league, the tandem of the best goalies in the league. I wouldn't even think of trading them. But as I say, I watched the Bruins. They have a good chemistry among them. If it works, don't fix it. And I think it was Raycroft's point about playing the money. That's a good point. Tough to talk about that.
All right, thanks, Jay. So on the goalies, listen, I think to explain like where my changes come is, you know, I was of the mindset that you only trade Ullmark if you're getting a great haul in return. Basically, if someone's overpaying. What's changed for me is I'm now open to it doesn't necessarily have to be maximum value. But, Razor, I am curious about this, though, because we talk about two goalies being a strength. Does that continue to be a strength in the playoffs? Would you be open to the rotation? Would you be open to using both? Or because I kind of feel like if you're going to go back to, hey, just ride the hot hand, like how much value does having two great goalies, how much does that carry in the playoffs?
I don't know. I just keep going back to like the circumstance of the playoffs, and we keep talking about like the how the playoffs shake out, and I think last year was such an example of like you need things to fall your way, and you need matchups to be bright. But that I guess that's separate to your question. Your question about the goaltenders, I don't see how a rotation works. I've explained why I don't think a rotation works. I don't think you go in saying this is going to be a solid rotation no matter what happens. We're not making any adjustments to it. We're just going to roll a rotation. Because inevitably it's going to happen. Goalie's going to lose 1-0 game one. The next goalie's going to win 5-4 the next game. The next goalie's going to lose 1-0. Game 4, the next guy's going to win 5-4 and barely hang on. And now you're looking at Game 5, a pivotal game. One goalie's given up 2 goals on 100 shots in 2 games. The other goalie's given up 8 goals on 40 shots. But he's got 2 wins. Who are you playing in Game 5? Are you going back to the guy that's lost? Are you going back to... Like, it just causes so much angst within the team and with the goalies and the coaches. Guys just want to go with one guy. Now, I know you're going to need 2 goalies to win a Stanley Cup. I think that's been proven the last couple of years, unless you have Andrei Vasilevsky. But to get out of the first round, and that's really the only focus of all of these teams is to get out of the first round, and we'll deal with the rest, is you probably only need one guy. And I guess that takes away from the argument that you need 2 guys as strength. But I think that with this team, with this group, you just can't afford to not have both of these guys playing till the end of the season, and you really hope that one of them takes the ball and runs with it for the first time in 3 years because they haven't done it, right? And maybe that's a little bit on the goalies too, right? Like we don't hear a lot of goalie chatter like maybe the 6-on-5s on the goalies. I love both goalies. I think they're the greatest people. They're great goaltenders. I would want them on my team all day, every day. But maybe they need to make a save 6-on-5. Maybe they needed to make a save in the playoffs. Maybe these goalies aren't good enough. Like, and maybe that makes it harder to trade one of them because we don't know if either one of them can actually do it. And we're a little like all of those things add into it. So the 2 goalie thing does cause problems come playoff time. I think you need one of them, but I think also you can get one of these guys to get on a hot streak for just 6 days. Just 6 days. That's all I want to steal 2 victories in a playoff round in the middle of April.
It is so funny, like listening to you talk about how they need 2 goalies, and then like you're like, no, we're not going 2 goalies in the playoffs. But like, so here's my thing, and I'm not gonna like question your knowledge comes from being a goalie and understanding goaltenders way more than I do. But in your situation where you're explaining like you split goaltending, one loses the first game, one wins the second game. First guy loses another game. Then at that point, you rotate the first 4 games, and then you're like, okay, now we might have settled on someone. Like once we see the little bit of a sample size in the playoffs and who's going at the time, then you can take that guy and roll with it. But to start out, I don't think it's like day one, we're going Ullmark whole series, because that also backfired and caused angst, like you mentioned, when it's like, okay, well, we have this other goalie that's right here ready to go. He is chomping at the bit to get in, and then you put him in Game 7, and he didn't have, it's just a tough situation to come in.
Right. We did a couple of those episodes.
Oh, yeah.
A couple of those shows last year where it was, do you make the change now?
Yeah.
Did they wait too long to make the change? Like, you're going to Swayman cold for Game 7. So I think either way, if you have 2 really good goalies, unless the guy you start with just runs with it and is excellent throughout the playoffs, there's going to be issues regardless, because you're going to have that other goalie who is really good, and you're going to, even if you're not doing a rotation, you're going to have those questions of, okay, well, Ullmark looked a little off for 1 game. Okay, but then he bounced back. Oh, but then he looked a little off again. And now it's like, all right, is 1 bad game enough to make the change? Is 2 bad games enough? Like, or not even bad games, mediocre games, okay games, 1 soft goal. Like, no matter what, if you have 2 really good goalies, you're going to have those questions of when and how do you make changes. So I think those problems are there almost regardless. But I would say if they're going to keep both goalies and rotate them down the stretch here, if that's working as you get to the playoffs, this was my thing last year. Keep doing whatever's working in the regular season. So if they're both playing well down the stretch and you're rotating, keep it going in the playoffs. That's where I am. Is like, if you're going to keep them because they're this great asset, then you better be willing to use them. Like don't then try to ride one of them for 7 straight games when you said it, they haven't done it. Well, and now, I will say, Swayman hasn't gotten that chance to be the number 1 from Game 1, right? The last 2 years, it's been Ullmark who started the series, and Swayman's ended up finishing it.
Yeah, and Swayman played the 5 straight at the end against Carolina. I think this year might lend itself a little easier to go to a rotation if there ever was one, because neither one of them are going to be Vezina Trophy guys. I think, again, Linus Ullmark lost 6 games all year, something ridiculous. So no one ever thought he was going to lose 4 in a week. I mean, that was my whole thing. How is this team going to lose 4 games in 8 days? They did, shockingly. But you this year lends itself because neither one of they've all kind of been the same. I know Swayman went to the All-Star game, but they've essentially been the same. I think Ullmark had some tougher games than Swayman at this. Like, they could be pretty identical, and so maybe that lends itself to the rotation. I just, internally, it is really difficult, just like it is really difficult for these guys that are actually making these deals, actually making these calls, to worry about the goaltender on a daily basis. Just like it's going to be difficult in Toronto because they don't have a goalie. They have 3 guys that are okay. That's a very difficult situation as well, and they would probably rather have 2 really good guys and think about a rotation rather than wondering who's actually going to make a save for them. So the goaltending is always difficult.
Different kind of rotation.
Yes, exactly. Or Detroit Red Wings, right? They're getting the playoffs. They have Alex Lyon, who we know is going to suck in game 2, just like he did here in Boston. Like it's inevitable. Really, it's Vasilevsky's the only guy, and probably the Rangers. But even then, with Shesterkin, you're going to get some calls for Quick if they lose a couple of games because it's Shesterkin losing. So I look at this Eastern Conference and I see a goalie issue everywhere. Philadelphia Flyers, Sam Ersson, a rookie. How's he going to do? So. Everyone has their own little battles with the goaltending, and this is the Bruins. This is always going to be the Bruins until these guys are here. We're always going to talk about it. It's not a position of weakness, though, and you just want one of them to grab the ball and post 3 shutouts, Giguere guy like in the first round so we can get through the first round, and then all the talk, then you can play both guys because then it won't matter as much. It's the first 5 games that everyone's concerned about, right? Once you get through that, once you get to game 16 of the playoffs, someone else can play, and it's not going to really change things.
All right. We got hour 2 of Sunday Skate coming up. We're going till 11 a.m. Scott McLaughlin, Andrew Raycroft, Bridgette Proulx. Colin, tell us what you think. Do the Bruins need to do something big? Should they trade a goalie? Are you open to it? 617-779-7937. We'll be back right after this.
And Star Market, perfecting the art of fresh on WEEI.
Saka, right in, DeBrus, McAvoy, dangles, a poke check, he scores! Charlie McAvoy wins it in overtime!
Welcome back to Sunday Skate, hour 2. Scott McLaughlin, Andrew Raycroft, Bridgette Proulx. That was Charlie McAvoy's overtime winner against the Oilers on Wednesday. Incredibly entertaining game. Now,
yeah, ended at 1:10 in the morning, but it's okay. It was one of those ones where it was like, okay, they're on the West Coast. This game should be really interesting. I don't want to fall asleep a 0-0 game into the third, and it had everything. It had fights. It had a lot of goals. It had a great game winner by McAvoy. Unfortunately, I had my head on the pillow. I watched it all the way through, but I was like, it was a struggle. But I asked Nico to come back with this because, we've been focusing a lot on the last game, but it's been 4 games since we started, and one of those games was that very entertaining Edmonton game, and we had this debate on the skate pod. Was that McAvoy's prettiest goal of his career? I think it was. We went and looked back at some of his other nicer goals, and I just think the finish on that was. He was falling down. I don't know. It took a lot for him to put that in, and it looked nice, and it came it was just like a exclamation point at the end of that game.
It was certainly an exclamation point, and the stars on the ice, McAvoy rose to that occasion with that play. You watch that, and you almost want more from him at times when he does that, but it's more. You see the contrast of it, right? When he does it, it's like a bull. And when Quinn Hughes does it, he's like it's like a little butterfly kind of floating around. Where McAvoy toe drag is literally puts his head down. He's falling, he's rolling around, but he has the dexterity and the body control to be able to chip it in with that backhand at the end. It was a beauty. I don't remember a better one from him. I know there has been, but he seems to. He's doing a good job with he scores goals in overtime. He's got that low blocker wrister where he finds his way into the slot, and now he's got the toe drag that people are biting on a little bit. So his game offensively continues to grow in those kind of smaller situations, but overall, there's not many defensemen better than him in the league. There just isn't that can eat 26 minutes, play physical the way he does, and then still have the touch offensively. It's the full package. And you could probably get a lot for him on the trade deadline. So
I'm not doing that.
Okay,
for the record, not going there.
Fill the cabinet with him going somewhere.
Oh my God! Yeah, it opens up a lot of cap space, but I don't think that
he definitely has a knack in overtime.
Yeah.
And he's got 3 game-winning goals this year as a defenseman. It makes you wish you'd see him get into that slot area, get more of those finishes. In close in 5-on-5 situations, regulation, even power play. I think there's times he can be more aggressive from that center point position instead of always just staying back there. Maybe that we're talking about how can they fix the power play. That could be one thing. It's how can you get McAvoy down lower? Get him out of that center point spot where it seems like he's always kind of within the same, 10 by 10.
Yeah, and earlier in his career,
booth.
he was rotating a lot more on the power play the first few seasons that he was called upon to be on the power play. He'd do that give and go, like he find his way down towards the net. And in college, he was really good at cycling around. You'd find him anywhere during the power play when he was in college at BU. So we know he can do it, and that might be a good way to get more rotation. Like you said, that at this point they're kind of in a situation where they need to try everything to try to get that power play going. So.
Yeah, that pass to Crutch is just so hard to get away from, right? And that's why he kind of has to stay up there, because it has to be a right-handed shot. Like over the years, typically Pasta hits it better with the right-handed shot up there. That's just the way his angle, the spin off the pass, the spin off his shot. He likes that right-hander, just the angle that puck comes. So it's up to McAvoy to kind of facilitate that, and I think he has to take a backseat. But all of that, I think he could do a better job at finding a shot and taking a slapper from there and having that converge, at least from Marchand and Van Riemsdyk over on that side, getting to the front of the net, and Zacha, if he is in the bumper, turning and getting to the front of the net and making it a little simpler at times. You can see it's difficult. When you have a guy who scores 60 goals, you want to force it a little more when the power play is going bad, and that's what gets the Bruins in trouble. But it's also human nature to understand why it is something that gets forced.
Yeah. One other thing they have to figure out on the power play is the bumper. They've been moving guys in and out of there all year. Look, obviously you had Patrice Bergeron locked in there forever, so naturally there's going to be a step back. It's going to take time to figure it out, but they've tried Zacha there, Coyle, Morgan Geekie, the latest, and none of it really seems to ever stick. Maybe they just don't have a good bumper guy. I don't know, but they gotta figure out some way to have someone who's effective from that spot. And I don't think Geekie's going to be the answer. I know they tried that. You shake things up. I also just think Morgan Geekie can't be the only center on your top power play unit, because he's not good enough on faceoffs. I think he's 43% for the season. You're just risking losing that first draw, and they clear it down. There goes 20 seconds.
Yeah, and it's that right-handed shot, right, that Patrice was, because then you could work over on the right wing and leave David to kind of find his way, whereas when you have Zacha, you got over on the left. It seems like they're using the bumper over on the left, which allows them to cover three guys, including David, with two, and it's hard to circle and move. So I think that's why they're trying to get Geekie, because that gives it over on the other side. And it worked a little bit for a couple weeks around Christmas time, but I feel like everyone wants Zacha out there. I feel like they are more comfortable with him. But again, it does change the dynamic because it's over on the left side rather than the right. And if you could find, maybe it's McAvoy that needs to go down there. I don't know.
McAvoy in the bumper.
Put McAvoy in the bumper. We're talking about moving around. You could do that. Put him on the right-hand bumper.
Char and net front back.
Correct, exactly. And then maybe have, put Shattenkirk up top so you have that right shot still going over. Again, none of this is happening. I just thought of it in my head right now. But I'm trying to think of right shot guys that could go over there, because I think that's what makes everyone more comfortable.
I was joking with Scott that if they can't find anyone they like in the bumper, just go no bumper back, old school, no bumper.
Umbrella and an eye.
Yeah, kidding, but
yeah, we were talking off air. We watch a lot of college hockey, and Northeastern runs a power play without a bumper, and it looks so foreign. I'm it's hard to believe 15 years ago this is what every power play looked like. All right,
the
Bridgette,
overload is so funny, right? It's hilarious that it was there.
Bridgette, do you have other questions?
Yeah, I do. So this is it's something that affects the team quite a bit. But so we were talking about how, remember last Sunday we were saying, okay, Monday, Bruins have Dallas, need to finish out the road trips or the homestand strong. So they beat Dallas in the shootout Monday, and that was, Dallas is one of the better teams in the league right now. So they end the homestand on a high note, but they lose Hampus Lindholm. And so Hampus Lindholm doesn't make the road trip. Mason Lohrei gets recalled from Providence, and so I want to get your opinion on how you've liked him since he got called up, because he had that 3-assist game against Edmonton, probably his best game as a pro so far, and he has looked good on this road trip, and it begs the question, like, with him playing well, if he keeps playing well in his call-up, do you even consider sending him back down? Is he someone that sticks in your lineup, and does that change what you do at the trade deadline on defense?
I don't think it changes what you do on the defense at the deadline. I think the idea whether he goes back down to the minors could change depending on what they do at the deadline, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, because he's the easy option to send down because he doesn't have to get waived.
Of course, and you can call him back up as soon as the playoffs start if you wanted him around. Or like, there's options there, and I think depending on who they get or if they get or what they get, it might be that position where Lohrei is. Now, I thought he was great. Of course, 3 assists is great in Edmonton, but him backing it up in Calgary and not really noticing him was very important to me. I didn't want to see him go back to wheeling and dealing against Calgary. I wanted him to settle in and make plays and be a defenseman, and I thought he did that against Calgary, which was really a big bonus. I thought the same against Vancouver. He didn't really get out in the play, didn't really turn the puck over. I thought he was pretty solid. So, yes, it's been a really good 3 days for Mason Lohrei, and he's making it tough, especially with the way that last pairing is played, to take him out of the lineup.
Yeah, I think each time he's come up this season, he's looked better than the last. Like, his first stretch up here, which kind of ended around Thanksgiving, you saw the flashes offensively, you saw the transition game, but you also saw him get exposed a bit in his own end, and you knew, okay, there's stuff he has to work on there. Okay with sending him down. Like, he's a first-year pro. He's going to learn it. Second time he came up, I thought he was playing pretty well, and I didn't think he deserved to get sent back down that second stretch. I think it was just a numbers game where Forbort was coming back from injury, Wotherspoon was playing well, and there was a waiver situation. So because he can go down without waivers, he was the odd man out. And now he comes up this time because of injury to Lindholm. And, yeah, I think he's looked really solid. And I think it could change your deadline plans, because if Mason Lohrei can handle top 4 minutes, that is a huge plus. I'm not quite there to the point of saying he can do it in the playoffs. That's a different beast, but he's doing it right now, and he's looking pretty good doing it. And, you know, like, does that, if Noah Hanifin was your top target, if Mason Lohrei can be 75% of Noah Hanifin, I know they're slightly different players, but it's that same idea of a mobile guy who can play in your top 4. All right, do you say, you know what, we'll revisit the Hanifin conversation in the summer? Let's go get a scorer. Let's go get a forward. Like, it could change it that way if you think he can be a real contributor and player for you down the stretch.
The little bit of the issue is when Lindholm comes back is it's Lindholm-Carlo, right? Like, they play great together. They're a great pairing. Then that means Lohrei would have to play with McAvoy. And then you're playing the big boys. And it would be nice if you could find and have someone there with McAvoy who's big and long, can play, and be able to put Lohrei as the third pair. And then you can work him into different situations, put him in good offensive situations, protect him a little bit. I would be a little nervous having him be with McAvoy game 1 against the Tampa Bay Lightning and Nikita Kucherov. That is like a lot to take. It really is. Like, even when McAvoy came up and played in the playoffs against they were able to, they had him with Chara. Right, like Big Z was Big Z then, and that's where it's you have to be a little careful, because if you go that route and you don't have anyone else, that's what you're dealing with for 7 games in the first round. But
well, could you go Lindholm, McAvoy, and Lohrei Carlo? It changes how you use your pairings a bit, right? Lohrei Carlo's not going to get all the same shutdown matchups that Lindholm Carlo does, but it's an option. Like something
it
to
is.
consider.
It is. I think we've seen that they really want to keep McAvoy and Lindholm separate. They really like the idea of having one of those guys on the ice for 45 minutes of the game. But no, you could do that on the road. You could find different pockets to do that. I just think you definitely need another guy. You need, and that's where the deadline comes in. If you get a guy that's really solid, that really helps your back end, I think Lohrei can stay. If not, then I think it gets a little dicier, which, again, maybe counterintuitive, but maybe you just need him. That's the other, like, maybe if you don't get someone, it turns into a necessity and he's just thrown to the wolves.
All right, we got to catch a break here. More Sunday Skate coming up next. Bridgette has you trending. We'll be back after this.
This is Sunday Skate on WEEI.
Save us as a favorite on the Odyssey app and take Boston Sports Original everywhere you go.
Welcome back to Sunday Skate. I'm your host, Scott McLaughlin, with Andrew Raycroft and Bridgette
yes,
Proulx.
he picks the music, in case anybody was wondering.
We got to get a taste of the Pacific Northwest.
I like that. A little Seattle grunge vibe. It's on point.
Uh-huh. By the way, we didn't get into this last week, but Razor, why is Fourier trying to change your nickname to The Razor?
Who knows what Fourier does anything? Yes, but he is sticking to it. Like he only says The Razor now. Like it's man, what a treat calling into those guys on a Friday afternoon, Friday morning. You never know what you're going to get. But yes, according to him, I am the Razor. And I have to work Dunsky in at some point tomorrow night into the broadcast. So, yeah, he is on me for Dunsky.
Yeah, well, I'm just glad he hasn't seen me in a while. I haven't been in the office since October. And every time he sees me, the first thing he says is, "Do you have my cookies? Where are my cookies?" Doesn't say hi, just says cookies. And then one time he went through my bag to see if I had cookies. I was like, I don't just carry sugar cookies with me constantly, but... yeah, he will jump me over cookies, and as soon as I see him this week, that's the first thing he's going to say to me.
Yeah, well, it's like a dog who's like been trained to certain behaviors. Like,
yeah,
yes,
that's
him.
He gets very excited.
Sees you,
when
he thinks goodies.
Yeah, he gets excited when I come into the office because it just immediately goes cookies. Like, yeah, he stole all of Megan's cookies when I made her some when she first got brought on full time. I go, do not let him see these. Just take a few in there, hand him a few. And she brought the whole container in. What happened? I saw him pouring the entire container into a trash bag that he got from the cleaning lady, tying it up and putting it in his car.
What an animal.
Yeah, Razor, I feel like moving from Thursday to Friday this year, like you get extra loopy Fourier on a Friday.
Yeah, he's not paying attention at all on Friday. Like Thursday you kind of have, but Friday he's mailing it in as badly as anyone is, so he is not paying attention or doesn't know what's going on.
All right, let's go to the phones here and take Bill from Belchertown. Bill, good morning. What do you got?
Oh, hi guys. Thanks for taking my call. I didn't play hockey as a kid, but I watched the Bruins. Big fan of you guys' radio station. I'm in my car too often, but so I watched the second and third period last night, and the thing that stood out to me was there's no resistance through the neutral zone, and so they're in their defensive zone the whole time. Got to believe that's exhausting, but what does it take to get somebody in front of somebody in the neutral zone? I mean, I'm an old guy, but take a lesson from the Devils of old. I felt like they never had to play defense because you couldn't get it through the neutral zone, and I think that would help the Bruins a lot.
Yeah, thanks for the call, Bill. It's a good observation, especially from that Vancouver game. That third period, they were just flying through the neutral zone, almost at will. And again, I think this kind of comes back to like being caught between two minds, where it's like either you're gonna be aggressive and get in on the forecheck in the offensive zone and slow that transition down before it even gets started, or if you're playing conservative, it has to be a more structured trap, something that's gonna clog up the neutral zone. Razor, I don't know if you have other ideas on why that was happening.
Well, I think last night it was happening because they didn't get it in deep at all. They're just hanging on in their own zone, and when they did get it out of their zone, it was only going out to the far blue line, and they're changing. They had guys come. At least 4 times they had 2 guys change at once, over on the left wing, closest to the bench. Everyone else had to get stay out because Quinn Hughes wheeled it and moved it to the weak side, and then they dumped it in, and then they got the rest of the guys changed off while they're dumping. So it was a little perpetual snowball last night in that they just couldn't get any pressure in the offensive zone. That's when your neutral zone's at its best. Now, you can't really go back to the left wing lock of the New Jersey Devils because the game's so fast and you're not allowed to hook and hold like Scott Stevens and Ken Danico did back then. Like, the game's changed a little bit in that way. The best way to do it is to get on the offense and get possession down in the offensive zone. That's what the Bruins weren't able to do last night against Vancouver.
Yeah, you also can't drill guys in the head as they come across the blue line, like Scott Stevens
That
did.
certainly helps your neutral zone when guys are scared to go anywhere near the middle of the ice.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not crossing in that area if you're allowed to take shots like that, which, like you mentioned, the transition game is a lot faster these days just because of the skill sets that guys have, and especially defensemen are so much better at breaking out the puck now. And, there's less, you can't impede people the way that you used to be able to. But no, it's a good point. The neutral zone, you can't allow quick transition because then you get yourself caught out of position, and you have to scramble a little bit to get set up in your own defensive end.
Yeah, and that's where, I'll come back to like the blown leads starting before the 6-on-5. That's where I want to see the Bruins get, as you mentioned it, get pucks in deep, get in on the forecheck, establish some offensive zone time, slow down that transition as it gets started. Force Vancouver to flip a puck out into the neutral zone. It was very frustrating to watch because
it was a tough third last night.
Yeah.
It was not good, and that started with the power play. They were just hanging on, and you knew at 7-11 it wasn't long. There was too much time. There's too much time at 7 to make it 2-1 for them to hang on, and too good of a team on the other side. Don't forget, Vancouver's the best team in the NHL, right? They have the most points in the National Hockey League. That's also part of this, right? Because you're playing a pretty good team. The other team wants to win too.
All right. One of the things we haven't really touched on a more positive note is the great story that is Justin Brazeau, and I guess we can expand that to the fourth line in general, or guys they've called up in general. We touched on Lohrei looking good, but Brazeau, talk about found money. I mean, he, undrafted. He's bounced between AHL, ECHL for a few years. They signed him to an AHL contract. He has a good season down in Providence last year. And then, an even better season this year. Gets an NHL deal. They call him up. And you're like, wow, this looks like exactly what they've been missing on the fourth line. Here's a guy with, now he's not super physical and he's not much of a fighter. So he's not that kind of fourth liner, but he's a good play. He's getting to the net front. He's getting to grade A areas. He's making plays. He makes a really nice play to set up Jesper Bogvist's goal last night, the Bruins' first goal of the game, where he has a good stick in the neutral zone to win the puck and then uses that long reach to make a pass around Quinn Hughes to Bogvist.
And Richard won the faceoff to set that up, too.
Yeah.
So it was all those guys.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, it's we've talked about, do you need to go find an identity guy on the fourth line or something like that? And all of a sudden, the fourth line really doesn't look like a problem at all. In fact, it looks pretty good this last week or so.
Yeah, you really want it to look good for another 10 days, right? You really want those guys to look good and look the way they have because it just fits. It's just nice seeing a big, long guy out there, whether he's as tough as Bob Proulx. That's irrelevant, I think, nowadays. You just need someone big and long, and he gets to his spot. He understands the game. He got 113 points in junior hockey. He does have a nose, and he has hockey sense, and he's a bigger guy, so he's always going to get his foot speed, etc. But once you're a pro hockey guy for this long, you just play the game, and it doesn't matter about that skill set as long as you get to your spot and you make plays like he has this past week in the NHL. With Boqvist and Richard, that kind of offsets that. If those guys get on the he's a really smart player as well. These three guys are really smart. I guess that what really stands out too is their hockey sense is really, really good, and they played off each other really well. And it's been a completely different look than what we've seen from the fourth line all season, where we're wanting a little bit more, or at least having an impact rather than just skating up and down the wall and killing 30 seconds. This is actually productive. And I'm really rooting for the fact that these guys can keep this going. That's going to be the question mark, is the consistency that they've never made it to the NHL for a long period of time. So can they keep it going? Can they do it in the playoffs? But to this point, the eye test says that this is what the Bruins need with the mix of personnel on that fourth line.
Yeah, and so Boquist has multiple goals in this stretch.
And he's an NHLer. Right,
yeah,
he's got 175 games going into this. Like, he's an NHLer. He's played 22 straight. He's an NHLer. He's going to be that fourth line center.
Yeah, so he fits in that he has the more experience than Brazeau and Richard, and he's fast, and he can play center. They've slid him over to wing. I've seen Richard take some of their draws and get moved around a little bit, but main point being, production is coming from the fourth line now. So Brazeau scores in his first game, and he almost scored twice in that game against Dallas. And Boquist scored last night. Boquist scored against Dallas. Richard has been involved in the offense, and he's been kind of a pest in the forecheck and doing the things right that when they called him up, he's doing essentially exactly what they thought he would do, and he's doing it well. And for Brazeau, what makes him the right fit right now is that he's doing exactly what they wanted, which is going to the net, being a pest in front of the net, being a big body that's hard to move off the puck, so his puck possession is good. And when you put those things together on the fourth line, they've been able to take care of their matchups, and they've been able to score. And that comes in a stretch where, like we mentioned, some of their other lines haven't been producing. Their power play hasn't been producing, but when you're getting the fourth line scoring, that maybe allows management to direct their energy elsewhere at the deadline. I think that's what you're getting at, Razor. That's why you want them to play well over the next
exactly.
few weeks, because then it's kind of like, okay, look away from the fourth line, look to the top six, or look to the defense to add.
Yeah, and Richard, I thought they've tried moving Richard in particular. They've moved him up in the lineup a couple times, and I'd rather see him just keep these guys together on the fourth line, because I don't really think any of the guys they've used on the fourth line are really third liners. So keep your top 9 guys in your top 9. Keep this fourth line together and see what they do. And yeah, Richard, I thought in the Calgary game, he was out there for 2 of those rush goals against. And on at least one of them, I thought he was one of the guys who took kind of a bad line on the back check and allowed a guy to get open. Then you see in the Vancouver game, I'm sure there was a conversation in between. He had some really good back checks, like breaking up plays, using his speed to get back. So that's also like the kind of quick learning you want to see on something like that, where one game to the next, he seems to have, figured it out. So, yeah, I don't know if it's going to hold up and be a fourth line come playoffs, but they're playing well now. And Bridgette, like you said, if they play like this, I don't need to spend any assets on a fourth liner. Go focus your attention higher in the lineup, because I think that's where there's still questions. They still haven't quite found the combinations that work consistently in their top 9. And I think we should get to this, but it feels like it's going to be a question right up to the deadline. What do you do with Jake DeBrusk? He had a great game in Edmonton, in his hometown. Goal and an assist all over the ice. I think he's had some other good games recently, but ultimately it's 11 of the last 12 games he has not had a point. And that kind of drought is coming at really the worst possible time for him, because I'm sure he wanted an extension and certainty before the deadline. And if anything, now you only have more uncertainty about what the Bruins are going to do with Jake DeBrusk.
Tough time to go cold. And on top of it, right, it's Zacha goalless in 8. It's Charlie Coyle. Yes, he scored 2 goals in Calgary, but beyond that, it's very similar to 10 points in 8 of 9. No points in 8 of 9. So the 3 of them collectively going cold right now is also a huge deal why these overtimes and 6-on-5s are coming up, because that's not secondary scoring. That's it's actually amazing if you think about how little those 3 have scored, and the Bruins are still hanging in against Edmonton and Calgary and Vancouver, these top teams in the league, when you back into it. And I guess that's another positive part, that we've gone straight to 6-on-5 and straight, right? And that's what we do. I get it. That's what this team's kind of forced us into doing too because they've been so good for 2 years. But on the positive side of it, / negative side, is that these three guys have to score more if this team's going to do anything. They're out in 7 games. If those three guys don't have points in 7 games in the playoffs, they have no chance, 0 chance, locked, loaded, forget it. So the fact that they haven't been very good offensively for 3 weeks now is a concern. And to your point with DeBrusk and the extension, it does leave question marks, and it leaves uncertainty. He wouldn't be the best player to ever go away without an asset coming back, meaning you could go into the deadline not having him signed, a little unsure, and hope he goes on a run like Jake DeBrusk can easily go on a run with the drop of a hat. But it still is a risk, and it's still something that I'm sure that everyone's not too comfortable about. It's a tough decision. And the reality is he should be commended for his 200-foot game because it has been so much better this year. But at the end of the day, he has to score as well. Like he's one of those guys that has to. Brazeau doesn't have to get a point the rest of the season. Boquist doesn't to help this team. But DeBrusk, Zacha, and Coyle, they need to, especially DeBrusk.
Yeah, and think about DeBrusk. If DeBrusk doesn't contribute in the playoffs at all, then what's the fan base going to be saying? They're going to be saying you should have gotten something for him when you could have. Now he didn't help you, and now he's, you might lose him for nothing. You could have gotten something for him at the deadline, and it looks like a bad move if. But once again, you can't predict the future. He could go on a streak in the playoffs, but if he doesn't and they didn't get anything for him, you will hear it from the fan base that they should have, maybe had some hockey trade that they could have found and flip him for a different winger, which is weirdly what we've said about Jake DeBrusk, several of the last few trade deadlines. Does he need a change of scenery and someone else need a change of scenery, so they swap their forwards? It comes up every deadline because he's streaky and he goes through these times where it's okay, maybe they could find a better option, or maybe he's a better option. It's impossible to say when he goes on hot streaks and cold streaks.
Yeah, or again along the lines of shaking things up or making multiple deals, you get some sort of asset for DeBrusk, then you turn around, combine that with another asset or two, and get someone better, more consistent than him. And we could run through the names of guys who potentially might be out there. I think Jake Gensel is going to be the biggest name. I don't know if there's any way to make that happen, but something like that where you're upgrading that spot. You're bringing in a better top 6 wing. I would be open to that. And, I do think there's teams that'd be interested in DeBrusk. The problem there is, if you're talking about Gensel or a Vladimir Tarasenko, the team that might want DeBrusk might be the team that misses out on those guys. So one of those guys might already be off the board. So it does get complicated, but it's something, again, I just think they have to consider. I feel like almost everything should be on the table for them because, again, I just feel like some sort of, to come back to my opening take, some sort of shakeup feels needed or feels like it could really benefit this team.
It gets, yeah. Again, we're talking that they need more scoring in the top 6, and that's the issue with trading DeBrusk. It does get complicated because, and I think we've seen. I think history has proven to us that they really want Jake DeBrusk here scoring for them. There's been many times to have traded Jake DeBrusk, and they've refused to do so. And again, I think he's got his 200-foot game. I think he's been very helpful for this group. And when he's scoring, it's extremely helpful. They don't lose when he gets going and when he's playing the 200-foot game. And he makes that Coyle and Marchand pairing so much better when he is getting going. So, yeah, again, I think right now I'm leaning more fingers crossed he gets going and hope. But just because of the scenario of trying to trade him for something better that you don't really know is going to fit with everyone is difficult. So I don't think I think it's going to be hard it's going to be hard to deal him too if he hasn't got any points in 15 games. That's the other thing that makes it really difficult too, right? To actually get value that you think you should get for him when he hasn't scored in February. That's a little nerve-wracking for a team on the other side. So again, all these scenarios, like I can't wait for 8 days to go by or 10 days to go by to see if we have any deals to really know what these guys are all worth. Like, what's Jake Gensel actually worth? Like, what are the Penguins going to get for him is so fascinating to me. I
like Jake Gensel a lot. So.
Well, the Penguins aren't going to trade him here, right? That's the issue.
That's exactly.
He's going to go west. He's going to go to a team like Pittsburgh's, especially with all the nuance with the Penguins here in Boston. I don't think he's coming here. That would be my guess.
Yeah, true.
As much as that, it would be cool to see, but I don't think he's coming. Like you're not going to get him. I don't think.
And by the way, he's injured and likely out through the trade deadline, which also complicates that. But all right, we got one segment of Sunday Skate left. Scott McLaughlin, Andrew Raycroft, Bridgette Proulx. We can maybe take another call too, 617-779-7937. If you have any thoughts on what the Bruins need to do, should do, we'll be back after this.
AUDACY. Type that into your app search, then download.
This is Sunday Skate on WEEI.
Welcome back. Final segment of Sunday Skate with Andrew Raycroft and Bridgette Proulx. I'm Scott McLaughlin. Want to run through a couple texts here. 617. I think the Bruins are getting killed in face-offs, directly affecting late game success. It is a factor. They're below 50% on faceoffs for the season. I think we were all so used to 20 years of Patrice Bergeron being around 60%, but of the guys on the roster right now, Coyle and Zacha, the only ones over 50%. And yes, they're going to take the bulk of your faceoffs, but it's not like they're dominant. So it does feel like they could use another good faceoff guy, and that might be Johnny Beecher getting called up again at some point. Obviously, they felt there's other parts of his game he needs to work on in Providence, but he was good on faceoffs when he was up there, and it certainly feels like they could use another guy who can win some key draws for them.
Last night there was 11 of 32 or 11 and 32 in their own zone.
Yeah.
Like that's and it's not. They're not contested. I guess that's the other thing too. There's a win and a loss, and then there's a win and a loss. And last night were losses. Both goals directly back. You can't close gap. You can't pressure like we want them to pressure if it goes directly back to Quinn Hughes. If you go right at him, forget it. You're over. So it has to be better. The forward, the centermen have to find ways. The wingers have to find ways to Are they expecting a loss? Have they gotten the mentality yet that they're going to lose this draw rather than expecting to win every draw last year? All the face-off plays they've run over the last 7 years out of the defensive zone, out of the offensive zone, might not pertain to this anymore. You might have to expect to lose and cheat the other way rather than cheating to go on offense. Again, all things that require much more of a deep dive into how they're playing off of these face-offs. But it was inevitable last night that the face-off was the reason they were getting smoked, especially in the third period. They couldn't get possession.
Yeah, we got, 508 text. Toronto won again, nipping at the Bruins' heels. Don't know if they're quite nipping yet. 7 points back, but Toronto does have 2 games in hand. I guess I'm not all that worried about whether you're first, second, or third in the division, honestly. Just stay out of the wild card, I would say, is the key. I like that they're in a division race with Florida. I think it's good. Like, it gives them, maybe not necessarily now, but down the stretch, those last few weeks of the season, something something real to focus on, not, the points record or, things that aren't going to directly affect your playoffs like last year.
Do you want to take our final call?
Sure. Let's go to Larry in Portland, who has some thoughts on the Bruins overtime.
Well, it's more an observation. I'd like to get your reaction to it. It seems like the most successful teams in the overtime, they'll be bringing the puck into the O-zone. The play that they set up isn't there, and they circle back into their own end and then reset. It seems like the Bruins very rarely do that. I mean, my memory might be faulty, but it seems like they'll still force it in, and then they'll almost skate it into tight coverage, as opposed to, oh, the play isn't there, let's reset and go back. It doesn't seem like they do that very often, and it seems like the most successful teams in overtime play will do that and open up the ice a lot more. So just your thoughts on that, and feel free, like my wife, to tell me I'm full of it. Thank you.
Thanks,
I hear
Larry.
you. Yeah. I get that all the time, too.
Yeah, thanks, Larry. So Bruins maybe have to play more boring in overtime.
Boy.
I think the regrouping is boring. I'm actually...
but it's a possession game, Scott.
It is.
And they definitely do it less. They definitely do the regrouping less than some of the other teams you'll watch. Way more conservative overtimes by other teams than the Bruins.
Yeah, I think there's got to be a balance there between, like, I want them to be aggressive and try to score and not play that boring circle back. But they do still take too many chances in overtime, I think. Attacking one-on-one or trying passes that aren't there or bad
the
shots.
The post-up play kills me. When they put it behind, they send it up like a 1-on-3 on a 3-on-3 overtime, and they send it up the boards. They did it last night, and they got away with it, but it is there's times where it's like that's such a bad risk-reward play. But overtime's the least, like 3-on-3, whatever. Let's 6-on-5. Enough is enough. Win games in regulation.
So you hear our play-out music going. Bridgette chooses the last song, and she says she has very different taste in music than me. She picked a song by one of my favorite bands.
So there you go.
Impala.
Wow.
You guys are more alike than you know.
Don't say that.
One of the best live shows I've seen in like the last decade. Tame Impala, excellent.
Wow.
We got John Lyons. I saw Nick Fitzy-Stevens too. He in? All right. So those guys coming up next, and we'll be back next week, 9 to 11 a.m., Sunday skate. Last week before the trade deadline. That's our last show before the trade deadline. So
thank goodness.
Stuff getting real there. We'll talk to you then.
Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.